of that. So I just want to welcome everybody. Um, want you to hold tight uh, so that we can read this book. Okay. So I want to thank you all, by the way. I'm not going to waste time. Like I said again, this is me reading this book straight to the point because the goal is to expose people like Dr. Abass Bundu and them for what they've done to our democracy. All right. That is what we're doing here. So I'm going to go ahead and start to read again from you know. Where I stopped yesterday, and we're just going to take it from there. All right. Welcome, everybody. Thank you. Make sure you share because, this is what we need in Sierra Leone. Like I always say, you guys, when we just focus on entertainment, short videos, just laugh and fun, we are not actually taking a stance on some of the things that we stand for, what we believe in. If every one of us were crying that, oh, Sierra Leone this, Sierra Leone that, it is because we're not paying attention to our politics. So what has happened is because we, the civilized individuals, are not paying attention to our politics. Now we have rogue individuals in charge of the state. So what do you see? Kush epidemic, drug epidemic, all of that kind of stuff. That is what is happening. So it's very crucial and it's very important for people like myself and all of us to come together and say enough is enough and let's do what's right for Sierra Leone, okay? Which is what I'm going to do. So I'm going to start the reading again. If you're joining me or you're watching this live and you've not seen the previous other two lives that I've done where I started reading chapter 1 of Dr. Abass Bundu's book, hey, this is day 3. Let's get it going, okay? I'm going to start again. I'm just going to take it from where I stopped yesterday, all right? So there we go, guys. There we go. This is it right here. All right. So I'm going to start with while this was taking place in Freetown, sporadic fighting broke out not only between the RAF and the army, but also between the Kamajo militia and the army. This was provoked largely by the news of Sanko's arrest in Nigeria. The mistrust this engendered was to make it almost impossible to revive negotiations between the warring parties for a long time. And by the end of the first quarter of 1997, the Abidjan Peace Accord was all but dead. Apart from attempting to end the war, the accord had also had other objectives too. It sought to grant mutual recognition to the warring parties. The RAF was to recognize the legitimacy of President Kaba's government in return for a blanket amnesty for past crimes and for being afforded the opportunity to transform itself into a registered political party. It also provided for the disarmament of all private militias and their reintegration into civil society under United Nations supervision. The repatriation of all foreign forces from the country, the downsizing of the national army, national reconciliation, and the promotion and protection of human rights and socio-economic justice. Apart from hostilities between the pro-government forces and the rebels, armed incidents increased wherever the Kamajon militia and the army came into contact, resulting in heavy civilian casualties. Likewise, the public highways everywhere became arenas of bloody clashes, leading to disruptions of vehicular traffic and attacks on civilian passengers, reminiscent of past hostilities between the rebels and the National Army. Unlike the Tamaboros and Kapras in the north, who had been disbanded by the NPRC in 1993, the Kamajon militia was left intact. When the SLPP came to power in 1996, it had anxieties about security, coupled with suspicions of disloyalty from certain elements in the army. This forced it to hang on to the Kamajors, who virtually became the military wing of the SLPP party. Obviously, the auguries did not look good. This development, exacerbated by public appointments to favored acolytes from the south, revived old memories of the Albert Magai era of the 60s. The only difference being that he had not had the benefit of a Kamajo militia at his beck and call. So again, guys, if you're just following me, this is the book of Dr. Abass Bundu. Of course, you see he's giving us account of actually what happened in 1996 when Tijan Kaba came to power. Guys, this is why I say let us read. We have to read these things and know these things so that we can prevent it from happening again, because that is what has affected Sierra Leone up to this day, and that is why democracy is decaying in front of our eyes, rotting. We don't have a democratic state in Sierra Leone right now. What we have is a dictatorship, authoritarianism, a one-party state system almost, because when people go to vote and you don't have the results of that election, that's not democracy. That is what we have in Sierra Leone. And Abass Bundu knows these things. He wrote about it, but he's superintendent of our parliament since 2018 that has helped to destroy democracy in Sierra Leone. So that is why I'm reading this book, so you guys would all be on the same page with me, so we can understand the history of our country and hold the people accountable. Hold people like the Abass Bundus accountable. It's telling you about the SLPP as a political party, what they did to democracy back in 1996. They disbanded Tamaboros and Capras in the north, but they kept the Kabajos. You all saw that. So for some of you, might you're very young, you might not have seen this. So this is why it's important for us to bring this out. And Victor Mgaseni, welcome, my brother. You say you are from City Grand Bassa, Buchanan, City Grand Bassa County. I guess that's Liberia. And Lamin Denke, hello, my brother. How are you? Okay, so let me continue here. As to be expected, the National Army became nervous and envious and began to see the Kamajon militia as a rival force. President Kaba's speech at the Mayong Day Parade in 1997 did not help matters either. He purported to clothe that militia with official status when he said, several countries maintain civil defense forces as auxiliary units to be called upon in time of need. Britain has its territorial army, and the United States maintains the National Guard. These forces are not standing armies or rivals to the national armies of those countries. Their roles are no different than what is now intended to be assigned to the Kabajos. Kaba's barring the National Army from performing security duties for the presidency was the last straw. Are you guys following this? You see, if you don't read this stuff that people like Abass Bundu put out for you all to see, you wouldn't know exactly what we're talking about. But this is how the division, was built in Sierra Leone between the Kamajors and the military that led us down the 1997 coup of Johnny Paul and our brother Ibrahim Bazi Kamara and all these other people that are locked up today whilst the Kamajors are free from the special courts in Rwanda. The only people that are left there is Ibrahim Bazi Kamara, Issa Sise. Most of these are Northerners, you see. So they freed the Augustine Baos and all these other people that are Kamajors. They gave them light sentences. But people like Ibrahim Bazi Kamara and the Issa Sise that actually gave us peace, they gave them 40, 50 years imprisonment. And they're still languishing in special court there in Rwanda. This is why it's nice to know the history. And when the APC came to power, they should have done something for Ibrahim Bazi Kamara and others to get them out of that place as well. But the APC party is just sad. It's sad. But let's read this. All right. So nothing could have been more ominous of impending disaster. Not much time passed before the fighting spread all over the countryside. In 1 week alone, more than 10 separate attacks were recorded on northern towns, leaving behind a gruesome pile of dismembered limbs and torsos, and more than at any time before the perpetrators adopted a ruinous scorched earth policy. Scarcely a village or hamlet was spared of decimation. Thus, even before May 1997, any pretense that the country was peaceful and stable was beginning to ring hollow. The government could only half govern, and the scene everywhere, except for the safe haven of Freetown, which had by then escaped the cruelty of the war, was one of chaos, unbridled lawlessness, and complete breakdown of human security. Kaba lost control of the country, as well as the capacity to deal with myriads of security problems springing up everywhere, including parts of the country hitherto untouched by the war. Worse still, a succession of allegedly uncovered coup plots did little to restore public confidence. The country was thus steered towards the precipice, and it was plain that sooner or later a crisis would result. The opportunity was thus created for anyone bent on derailing the country's fledgling democracy to do so. Quite apart from this, according to local press, the government was also waist deep in muck, yet nothing was done to pick up the shovel. To stifle press freedom and repress democratic dissent, the government enacted the Media Practitioners Act 1997. Under this new law, the right to speak freely, an essential attribute of democracy, was all but smothered. Compounding the situation was drug trafficking, nearly all from Nigeria. Discrimination was also brazen, as exemplified by the manner in which poverty, confiscated under NPRC decrees, was being returned to favored party supporters while others were refused. All these merely added to the pile of mounting human rights abuses, gnawing ignominiously at the country's precarious stability. The Economist summed it up well. President Kaba was seen as weak and arrogant, unable to act decisively against corrupt vested interests, slow to get the economy under control, and unwilling to make peace with the rebels. He also sidelined the army and relied on local self-defense militias known as Kamajors. That almost certainly helped bring on the coup. You see, Abass Bundu knows what brought the coup. And look at what is happening today in Sierra Leone. I even heard one of the soldiers that was giving testimony against Koita to say that he recognized Koita, because the bragging that he had was for him to say he recognized Koita and then he would be promoted. Now they said allegedly he's dead. He killed himself. He committed suicide, but nobody knows the facts. Not even the army knows the facts. They cannot report the facts to us as to what is happening. But you see, this is what is actually happening right now. But again, I'm here to read. You guys, whilst I'm reading, I'm sure a lot of things are coming through your mind, but focus on the reading. But I want you guys to see what Abass Bundu and all these other guys, they know what is happening in Sierra Leone. And they should not go scotch-free for this. This man is in his 80s. He should be playing with his great-grandkids somewhere. Not in our politics anymore, meddling and destroying our politics. Standing as a guard for the SLPP and Madabio to destroy democracy in Sierra Leone. And you have people like Honorable Abdul Kagbo, the leader of the opposition, the leader of the opposition in parliament, silent. Well, we're coming for him. It's just a matter of time. But let me read. I just want to read. So now that you guys have seen what caused the coup, the 1997 coup, now you're beginning to understand why the military felt the way they felt, that Johnny Paul and others had to come, Ibrahim Bazikamara and all these people had to come and overthrow the government, because again, the soldiers were threatened, their lives were threatened. The SLPP government of Tijan Kaba put the Kamajors over the military. So this was why the military said, what's going on here? They started killing these guys, started killing the military guys. They had to be hiding. And so they had to retaliate. That's why we had the 1997 coup. And look at what is happening in Sierra Leone today. That's why Madabio is constantly running around, because he's scared. He knows what he has done. But let me read. Let's read, guys. Sierra Leoneans, we have to read. Stop playing. Stop this entertainment nonsense thing that is going on. Pay attention to what is actually happening in your democracy. For you guys that are watching this, I know you're watching this because you're interested. Share it to your friends and other family members that are not paying attention to what is actually happening. Let me continue to read. The third coup d'etat in 1997. Few could therefore have been surprised when the military stepped in once more to interrupt civil governance of the country. Let me start again from the top. Few could therefore have been surprised when the military stepped in once more to interrupt civil governance of the country barely 14 months into Kaba's administration. It staged a successful purge on May 25, 1997. The coupists formed the junta, the Armed Forces Ruling Council, and invited the RAF to join them. To get together, they constituted the Armed Forces Revolutionary Council, AFRC, with Major Johnny Paul Kuroma, sprung from Gao, as chairman, and Fodisanko, then in detention in Nigeria, as vice chairman. This immediately stymied the rebellion to the extent that fighting ceased between the National Army and the rebels. The AFRC junta went on to suspend the 1991 constitution, ban all political parties, political meetings, and demonstrations, and usurp all legislative and executive powers. Many reasons have been proffered for this overthrow, but the failure to consolidate peace under the Abidjan Peace Accord, the rigging of the presidential election, and the granting of extraordinary privileges to the Kamajo militia over the National Army stand out most prominently. Kaba's supporters sometimes allege that there was external complicity in the coup, but there is no scintilla of evidence to support it. All foreign nationals wanting to leave were allowed to do so, and some governments sent ships and aircrafts. This was particularly true of the British, American, and Lebanese governments. Not one complained of any mistreatment of its nationals. Nigeria, for its part, not wanting to be accused of lacking capacity to protect its own nationals, estimated that over 5,000 decided not to evacuate them. The immediate aftermath of the coup was exceedingly violent, characterized by generalized looting, particularly of private property, and extreme cruelty, especially against women. Fear and anxiety gripped the once placid capital of Freetown. All hell broke loose. Thousands of Freetown residents, including professionals, fled the country. This took a heavy toll on essential services, in particular, resulting in the further deterioration sorry guys, let me just adjust this here. Resulting in the further deterioration of humanitarian conditions in the capital. Like President Momo before him, President Kaba decamped to Conakry, where he sought sanctuary. But unlike Momo, he invited General Abacha of Nigeria to intervene militarily to restore his government back to power. This invitation alone was sufficient to undermine any claim that Kaba was in effective control of the country. The counter-coup, 1998. Abacha obliged, intervening on June 2nd, 1997, his forces did not succeed in evicting the AFRC from the seat of power until February 12, 1998. After this, the Nigerian army virtually became an army of occupation until President Kaba returned from exile a month later. Before that, the opinion in certain quarters was that once the junta was dislodged from Freetown, that would spell the automatic collapse of the rebellion. It turned out to be most extravagant. Apart from proving stubborn fighters, the combined force of AFRC/RUF rebels staged one pitched battle after another against the Nigerians and the Kamajors in many parts of the country. Occasionally, they even forced the pro-government forces to retreat and reinforce. Hundreds of former junta soldiers who refused to join the rebels were hurriedly retrained and re-inducted into the fighting. Much of the chagrin of the Kamajor leaders who wanted to see them retrenched. This was followed by severe press censorship. All these actions confirm that while it may have been comparatively easy to subdue the junta in Freetown, pacifying the rest of the country was a different matter, to say nothing about the futility of the military option itself. SLPP and the army. Pay attention to these guys. Having taken the baton of leadership from one military junta only to become victim to another military coup d'etat in less than 14 months in office, one can reasonably understand President Kaba's skepticism about the army's subservience to civil authority. But the problem was that his attitude did not always stop at skepticism. Much too often, it's degenerated into a kind of paranoia or hysteria. At no time was this more vividly dramatized than when he abruptly announced the disbanding of the entire army. You guys remember this? This is why it's important to pay attention. I know, it's 1998, long time ago. Some of you guys were not even born. I see some of these folks on, WhatsApp and Facebook and talking smack and, defending foolishness because they were not even born yet. So they have no clue of what we're talking about. But yet, these are the kids that want to come and talk when people talk. So this is why it's important for them to read, because some of these kids don't even read books. Some of these guys on social media, on WhatsApp, Facebook, don't even read books. So they have no clue of what's actually happened or what has happened in the past. All right, let's see. Apart from being an undisguised act of vengeance for his overthrow of the AFRC, of course, it was considered a vengeance. That's what Pakaba had because of the military overthrow him in 1997. So he had that vengeance in him. That's why when he came back, he disbanded the army. And it was all because of his own doing. Because if they didn't put the Kamajos over the military would not have overthrown him, All right. Let me start again. Apart from being an undisguised act of vengeance for his overthrow by the AFRC, it is not easy to decipher that what else could have been behind this fit of temper against an army which the government must have known it needed as the country was still in the throes of war. However, walking down memory lane, one recalls that the SLPP party was the one that had instigated the coups of 1967, Brigadier Lansana's coup, and 1992, the NPRC coup. The SLPP party has always been behind all of these, mayhem in our country. The rebel war, the coups, everything is SLPP originated. So that is why if the APC was a serious political party, the leaders of the APC would be educating the young people of Sierra Leone to understand and give them the history of SLPP. I should not be the one doing this. This should be coming from the leaders of the APC as a political party, so much to the point that the SLPP would not be able to attract anyone in their 30s or even 40s. If only the APC and opposition members in that country were serious, if they're paying attention, if they're not in cahoots with this government to destroy democracy, the SLPP should not have a face in Sierra Leone's democracy. These are facts. This is not somebody making up any stories. These are facts. The first coup was SLPP. NPRC, SLPP was behind the NPRC coup of, Strasai and all of these, Marabio and all these other guys. Let's continue reading. All right. However, walking down memory lane, one recalls that the SLPP party was the one that had instigated the coups of 1967, Brigadier Lantana's coup, and 1992, the NPRC coup. And both were against the APC government. Kaba himself had supposedly played a significant behind-the-scene role as the way of paying back for his rapid promotion in the civil service by the SLPP government in the 60s. You see? This thing is deep, man. To say nothing about his marriage into a family with prominent connections with that party. Okay, let me read this again from the top so it's cohesive, okay? All right. Let me take it from Kaba himself had supposedly played a significant behind-the-scene role as a way of paying back for his rapid promotion in the civil service by the SLPP government in the 60s. To say nothing about his marriage into a family with prominent connections with that party. Again, throughout the NPRC junta rule from 1992 to 1996, he had played a larger-than-life role as chairman of its advisory council, which attempted to replace the 1991 constitution even before it had been tested in practice. So you see the role that Tijen Kaba played? All of this are history. History, guys. The SLPP party always has a way of harboring crooked people. You guys remember, Kaba was, a COI was found wanting for destroying the SLPMB, Sierra Leone Producing Marketing Board. You guys, I hope you guys know all of these things. And he was ordered to pay, or he was going to go to jail, so he ran away, came overseas, and did his doctorate, whatever, worked for the United Nations, and then came back and be president. Look at Sierra Leone history. Marabio, same thing, overthrow, came America, London, did his nonsense degrees, did nothing for himself to improve his life, and he came back through the SLPP and became a president. Anyway, Alakina something, brah. When you get to society, we know to read. This is what happens. If we are informed, the APC party at the time, the Anes Kourouma's former President Kourouma, if these guys were informed enough about people like Marabio would not come back and be president. Tijen Kabaka, he can't be president after that level of corruption and thievery that he did. Man, anyway, this is not about me analyzing. This is me reading this book. I want to read. So let's read. So again, remember, Kaba was part of the NPRC, okay. So again, throughout the NPRC junta rule from 1992 to 1996, he had played a larger-than-life role as chairman of the advisory council, which attempted to replace the 1991 constitution even before it had been tested in practice. And remember, Momo was the one who gave us multi-party democracy, and Tijen Kaba, they be one for come and change the constitution, the 1991 constitution. If not for, what happened, they would have replaced the 1991 constitution and make it more, just draconian, to say the least. But let's read. So the SLPP government of President Kaba knew well enough that the army was capable and seemed to be in awe of its might. It therefore felt it could not govern unless the military was brought under its thumb by hook or by crook. It also explains why Kaba's government was anxious to pack the army with its own handpicked followers from the south and east of the country, starting with its private Kamajo militia. It further explains why the government remains resolute. Excuse me. While the government remains resolute, despite many public protestations to maintain that militia, using whatever guise it could find and using the analogy of the territorial army in Britain when necessary. See how they were finding all kinds of stupid excuses? Anyways, so long as this attitude continues to lurk behind the intentions of the SLPP government, its relationship with the army, be it the former or the present, is likely to remain poor. Much of the best safeguard against this threat to the quality of civil-military relations probably lies in asserting and strengthening civil authority and control over the military. Interpersonal relationships matter, but they are not and should not be controlling as the national army is not a personal estate. Exactly. Let me read that again from the top. Much of the best safeguard against this threat to the quality of civil-military relations probably lies in asserting and strengthening civil authority and control over the military. Interpersonal relationships matter, but they are not and should not be controlling as the national army is not a personal estate. It is better and certainly less prone to caprice to move towards building inter-institutional relations between civil authority and the military interior. But this might not be feasible and practicable until the army can be convinced, as well as the civilian population, that the crucial process by which civil authority is chosen is wholly independent and free of executive interference and corruption. To the army, the best proof of this is when neither the security services nor any part thereof nor any private militia is deployed to carry out ballot rigging in any part of the country. In other words, government by consent must be by rules and procedures which not only provide for a level playing field for the players, but the referee himself must be genuinely free of taint and manipulation. In this way, a culture of respect for civil authority and control could develop and flourish among men and women under arms in Africa, and the civilian population would have the legal and moral right to demand no less. Attempted overthrow of Kaba in 1999. At no time was that futility of revenge more clearly demonstrated than when rebels managed to penetrate the backbone of Nigerian defenses in and around Freetown and stormed the city on January 6, 1999. Kaba's government was dislodged from the seat of power for the second time in as many years. It returned to power in February 1998. His return to power in February 1998 appears to have been somewhat intoxicating. It induced a revenge fixation among his supporters. Everybody remember this, right? Crafted in ways that were pretentious about respecting the rule of law, the international community was hoodwinked into seeing no evil as the revenge culture overwhelmed the country. James Jonah, who had been very loud in condemning what he perceived as genocide on the part of the AFRC junta, was surprisingly squeamish when that same term was used to describe similar brutalities by pro-government forces against people of northern origin. For example, in Kenema district in the east, the Kamajos reportedly carried out a sinister plan to kill strangers, which in this case meant people from the north of the country living in Kenema, which is predominantly Mende land. One school of thought suggests that some of the victims, including soldiers and ordinary citizens, such as petty traders, miners, and even the unemployed, were massacred in broad daylight, while others were forcibly removed from their homes at the dead of night and taken to some undisclosed locations, where they were clobbered to death. What is worse in some cases, the acts of savage butchery were crowned by removing vital human organs for only God knows what purposes. These pro-government vigilantes may have felt they were teaching their opponents a lesson. In fact, they were inflicting mortal wounds upon themselves. For when the rebels struck Freetown on that fateful day in January 1999, they too came with their hit list. Just as the SLPP had done in February 1998, the scene everywhere was nothing short of apocalyptic, as parts of eastern and central Freetown were reduced to rubble. Without trying to justify these acts of violence in any form, it is worth stating that, painful though it was, what happened on that day confirmed the old adage that revenge does not pay. But the attack on Freetown had not come suddenly. The government had had notice of it but decided to downplay it, assuring residents that the city was impregnable. Julius Spencer, Minister of Information, was so deft at painting silver linings around the blackest of clouds that his instinctive reaction to the most violent storm was to say it had cleared the air. It conveyed a confident message of victory that made most people become dismissive of any notion of power sharing. He even slammed as disinformation a statement by the United Nations Special Envoy that the northern half of the country had fallen to the rebels, and condemned the evacuation of British nationals as pandering to rebel tune to spread panic. This is all Julius Spencer, guys. But West Africa magazine was not convinced. In its editorial on December 21st, 1998, it opined, in Sierra Leone, there has been no end in sight to the bloody conflict that is taking place in the country's interior. When President Clinton's special envoy, the Reverend Jesse Jackson, visited Freetown and called for negotiations with the rebels, some government ministers were said to be privately opposed to such a move. They believe that the RAF will be defeated militarily. But some think their real motive for opposing negotiations may have been founded on self-preservation. If the men in the bush were to be brought into the fold, so the argument goes, then some of those who are now in positions of power may have to make way for the newcomers. If so, a rethink by these politicians may well be in order. You see, they were concerned about their positions. That's why they didn't want to strike a peace deal, even though Reverend Jesse Jackson, that was representing Bill Clinton at the time, came to Freetown to call for a peace talk. Right up to the eve of the invasion, the citizens of Freetown were being lured into a false sense of security. We have effectively thrown a security dragnet around the capital, and residents need not have any fear, a Nigerian military officer boasted. When independent journalists like Winston Ojukutu Macaulay reported something different, they were swiftly thrown into jail. Winston Ojukutu Macaulay was thrown into jail when he was reporting the factual things that was happening. When the rebels finally struck, it not only dented Nigeria's image as a regional superpower, it shattered public confidence in its ability to defend the country. In the vain hope of vanquishing the rebels and redeeming its bruised military pride, something resembling a scorched earth policy came close to characterizing the Nigerian military's pursuit in Eastern Freetown. Throughout those heady days, President Kaba again lost autonomy, looking more like a titular head momentarily separated from his authority. Looking more like a titular head momentarily separated from his authority. Now, ceasefire that never was. After holding his silence for a week, Kaba suddenly appeared at a press conference at the Lunge International Airport on January 7th and announced a ceasefire. Fori Sanko had become a prisoner of General Maxwell Kobe, the Nigerian military officer whom Kaba had appointed chief of the Sierra Leone Armed Forces. He took him out of Pademba Road prison on December 23rd, Kaba told the press that Sanko had agreed to a ceasefire in return for his freedom. But Sam Maskita Bokari, RUF field commander, was not convinced. He insisted on Sanko's release before agreeing to a ceasefire. On January 14th, President Charles Taylor of Liberia announced that he had brokered a peace deal between the RUF and the government. But Kaba promptly dismissed him, saying Taylor was only concerned about protecting his mercenary fighters who had been trapped in the fighting in Freetown. When this particular episode demonstrates more than anything else, what this particular episode demonstrates more than anything else is that Kaba still harbored hopes of gaining a military victory over the rebels. In fact, he was demanding military assistance from anybody who cared to listen. Even from the United Nations and the Western powers, whom he accused of playing double standards in that they were fighting for democracy in Iraq, but doing nothing to defend democracy in Sierra Leone. If the world believes in democracy, then it should come to our aid, he declared. For a man who had spent more than 20 years in the service of the world body, this outburst was most extraordinary. It showed he had learned but little, for he ought to have been familiar with the ways of the United Nations and how it works, particularly the fact that by charter, by precedent, and by principle, the organization is bound to seek conflict resolution primarily by peaceful means. It also shows that so long as Kaba remained in that mood, the nightmare of the citizens of Freetown was not going to end. Kaba's bravado came into the open during a visit by Nigeria's new foreign minister, Olisemeka, on January 25th. He proclaimed, now there is only a military solution. We have to push the rebels far, far from Freetown. By this time, Kaba carried no risk. He was the only president in the whole world with no peace and no army he could call his own. Earlier on, Julius Spencer had warned that because the Nigerian troops were having difficulty engaging the rebels, who were then mixing with civilians in the streets, anyone found in the streets would be considered a rebel and would be shot on sight. Again, let's see the policy of Julius Spencer, right? I'm going to read it from the top again. Earlier, Julius Spencer had warned that because the Nigerian troops were having difficulty engaging the rebels, who were then mixing with civilians in the streets, anyone found in the streets would be considered a rebel and would be shot on sight. On the other hand, when the rebels captured the eastern and central parts of Freetown, they were forcing residents to come out and demonstrate for peace, threatening to burn down their houses. When the citizens yielded to rebel coercion, Nigerian jet bombers were dispatched and dropped bombs on them. About 30 people, mostly civilians, were killed in one such incident in central Freetown on January 7. In reply to McDowell of the BBC, the Nigerian commander said he would not hesitate to use any weapon to deal with any potential threat. Such was the dreadful dilemma of the hapless citizens of Freetown, caught between Charybdis and Skilla. We'll have to look this up, guys. These words, man, Abass Bundu. Yeah, I don't want to see the word there, bruh. You say, but the read over here. Charybdis and Skilla. You guys look it up. I'll look it up when I'm done. All right. So the dilemma of the hapless citizens of Freetown caught between the devil and the deep sea, I guess. All right. But let's see. Thus, the door to dialogue became shut, and the voice of moderation marginalized each time the rebels gained the upper hand, and the government was struggling to regain control of lost ground. It was no different on January 6, 1999. The Alliance for Peace and Democracy in Sierra Leone, a London-based group of Sierra Leoneans concerned about the terrible woes the conflict was inflicting, made an appeal to the warring parties. It called for a political solution around three main objectives. First, an immediate ceasefire accompanied by a comprehensive peace agreement. Second, respect for the fundamental tenets of the Constitution in order to guarantee future stability. And third, the holding of genuinely free and fair elections under international supervision. It also appeared to them to eschew violence and embrace political dialogue and inclusivism as underlined by both the Abidjan and Conakry peace plans. Guys, you see? So, this is the reality of Sierra Leone, guys. Now, let's get to the question of democratic legitimacy. All right? Political power is rightly now bound up with the basic notion of legitimacy, which is founded solely on genuine democratic elections. But if elections are only as good as the conditions in which they are held, then few would disagree with the conditions in Sierra Leone in February and March of 1996 were not exactly the most conducive for democratic elections. Most parts of the country were impenetrable due to the war, and more than half of the population was either displaced internally or sheltering abroad as refugees. In those circumstances, to describe the elections as lawful would be exceptional, but to say they were democratic is quite another matter. Yet, it was this designation, parroted and dramatized by the government, that took center stage throughout the entire debate of the conflict after 1996. Led by the United Kingdom and the Commonwealth, which respectively had bankrolled and monitored the elections of 1996, international condemnation of the coup was strong. It stemmed mainly from the belief that the elections had been democratic. In its editorial on January 15, 1999, The Times encapsulated the thinking in the West when it wrote, Sierra Leone now comes absolute bottom of various United Nations indices of global poverty. By any measure, it would seem to be a failed state, complete breakdown, with the country divided between feuding warlords and no government able to exercise authority beyond the capital, would be a catastrophe, not just for Sierra Leoneans, but for all West Africa. However, grim the picture looks now, failure is not predestined. President Kaba has not so far proved a capable leader, but the symbolism of his democratic election is still important. But the symbolism of his democratic election is still important. It will be a costly and long struggle, but for the sake of all West Africa, Sierra Leone must not be allowed to fail. Is symbolic democracy enough? In the first world, where democracy is promoted as an international legal right, elections are either genuinely democratic or they are not. Voters may not like the victor or his party, but will never resort to violence to remove him because of the confidence they repose in the fairness of both the electoral process and its supervision. In the case of the third world, however, there seems to be a tendency in the first world to tolerate election results if they are not genuinely free and fair. Yeah, guys, does that ring a bell? That is why, again, I'm very skeptical about the tripartite committee, because to be honest with you, the United States, United Kingdom, they should have just simply tell BIA to step aside, and we should have conducted elections again from the start, register the people properly, and make sure we have free and fair elections if they really want to promote democracy in Sierra Leone. This thing has been going on. Abass Bundu knows all of these things, but yet he's sitting in a parliament that is not legally constituted. They don't have the mandate of the people. Section 5 of the Constitution, subsection 2, makes it very clear that sovereignty belongs to the people. Abass Bundu wrote about all of these things, but he's sitting there being a part of a parliament that is corrupt. The most corrupt parliament ever, the most rotten and nasty parliament we've ever had in the state of Sierra Leone. Abass Bundu knows. He wrote about all of these things, but he's sitting there destroying our democracy again. It's only a matter of time, guys. It's only a matter of time. All right, let me continue. Fairness in this context is seen as a thing of beauty, lying only in the eyes of the beholder. But why should the standard be different from the third world if the principle of democracy is universal and indivisible? Why should a government be enthroned with democratic legitimacy if it is not one established by genuinely free and fair elections? For Kofi Annan, it was democracy that was at stake in Sierra Leone. I hope the American ambassador is watching this, Ambassador Brian Hunt. I want you guys to refer to this at 44 minutes or so. Very important part of this live, okay? Thank you guys watching. Hope you guys will refer to this and refer that to the international partners. All right. For Kofi Annan was the Secretary General of the United Nations at the time. Yeah. It was a Ghanaian. For Kofi Annan, it was democracy that was at stake in Sierra Leone. The United Nations and the international community firmly upholds the principle that the will of the people shall be the basis of the authority of government, and that governments democratically elected shall not be overthrown by force, he said. The United Nations and the international community attach the greatest importance to the democratic order for Sierra Leone. The United Nations continues to stand ready to assist the people of Sierra Leone in their quest for a society grounded in democracy, the rule of law, respect for human rights, and the pursuit of peace and national reconciliation, he added. That statement underlines two things. First, the belief that President Kaba had been democratically elected. Second, the desire by the Western powers to emphasize their newly acquired distaste for undemocratic regimes. The actual conditions surrounding the elections have received scant or no attention at all, as indeed also the protestations by the democratic opposition that the elections had begun with an identification of the winner, followed by the adjustment of the voting figures to guarantee the result. In other words, what happened in 1996 was nothing short of manipulative democracy. Some foreign envoys in the country seem to have been closely consulted. They did not raise any objection, perhaps because they believed it otherwise to rock the boat when the country was trying to rid itself of a military junta. It is as simple as that. In its publication comments on the presidential runoff elections, March 15, 1996, the main opposition party, the United National People's Party, UNPP, strongly challenged the fairness of the poll. It claimed that there had been substantial irregularities by substantial irregularities to vitiate the result, including multiple voting by registered voters and voting by unregistered persons, including underage children. In the first presidential election of February 26, 1996, the average voter turnout for the whole country was 49.8% of the registered vote. Voting took place in all electoral districts except Tonkolili, a stronghold of presidential contender John Khalifa Smart, due to a contrived upsurge of rebel activity on the eve of the poll. Khalifa Smart therefore received only 22% of the national poll, as against 35.9% for Kaba. As no one obtained the statutory minimum of 55% in the first ballot, the two leading contenders went forward to a runoff on March 15th. On March 17th, INEC announced Kaba as winner with 59% of the vote, defeating Khalifa Smart with 41%. The UNPP argued that at least in 4 districts, traditional SLPP strongholds, the voter turnout was more than 100%. After strong protestation by Khalifa Smart, the chairman of INEC, Dr. James Jonah, reluctantly admitted that there had indeed been serious irregularities. However, his remedy was to penalize Kaba by reducing his vote by 70,000. This, in effect, adjusted the total vote in each of the affected districts of the statutory limit of 100% of registered voters. Jonah was apparently suffocated by the huge percentage of fraudulent votes. He thought by simply reducing Kaba's votes to equal 100% of registered voters, that would take care of the problem, legally speaking. It did not, because his action was not justified by the electoral law. Elections are contested and won on the basis of pre-established ground rules known to and accepted by all contenders in advance of the poll. They are not changed midstream at the whim of the election invigilator. Moreover, the identification of the rogue votes seemed selective and subjective, and therefore neither fair nor accurate. How sure could anyone be that, of the 100% votes that remained, they too were not tainted with fraud? At the end of the elections, Jonah was promptly rewarded, initially as ambassador to the United Nations and subsequently as Minister of Finance, making the stain of a rogue election look somewhat indelible. Indeed, most people have viewed these appointments as a great deal of cynicism. Now, look at former PPRC chairman, Abdoulaye Massiande Bangura. Now, he has been promoted as a justice at the Supreme Court in Sierra Leone. This was the man who was in charge of the PPRC, Political Party Regulation Commission, because that's the new name they gave it. After everything they did, cancelled, did not allow, political parties to rally like they used to do in Sierra Leone. This man, they watched the APC denigrate, in front of their eyes with the Alfred Peter contest saga and this and that, PPRC. But today, he has been paid off. He is justice at the Supreme Court in Sierra Leone. Mohamed Kanawe Kone, I think, is the chairman of Electoral Commission of West Africa. I'm here to read. I'm not here to analyze anything. Let's continue reading. If INEC thought the irregularities were substantial enough to warrant reducing the winner's overall vote, the presumption must be there indeed was a serious miscarriage of electoral justice. Rectifying injustice in such a case, however, demanded more than expunging the rogue votes, especially where one was not at all sure of the quantum of such votes. Two possibilities could have been considered. First, annulling the poll in the affected areas, but this would have had the effect of penalizing or disenfranchising genuine voters who may have had nothing to do with the fraud. A second and more rational approach would have been to invalidate the poll and conduct fresh elections in each affected district. Neither was done. INEC's first computer printout on March 16 shows a poll in excess of 100% for the following districts: Banff, 155.2%, Kailaun, 138.7%, Keneba, 116.9%, and Pujaun, 339.1%. Of these, the surplus vote cast for Kaba was Banff, 147.2%, Kailaun, 136.8%, Keneba, 109.8%, the Pujaun, 327.9%. Had the poll been annulled in these four districts, the result from the rest of the country would have given Kaba only 37% as against 63% for Karifa Smart. The following day, a second computer printout was published, adjusting the figures to the four districts as follows: Bo, 99.6%, Banff, 97.6%, Pujehun, 97.2%, Kailaun, 100%, Kenema, 100%. Not even countries from compulsory voting have been able to record this kind of turnout. That's how terrible the 1996 elections was. That was why Marabio said the world kind of green. You guys know what I'm talking about. Anyways, let me continue to read. The affected districts, undeniably strongholds of the SLPP, were the very districts which, again, as reported by INEC, had borne the brunt of the war more than any other region in the country. And continue the report. Thousands of villages with populations less than 1,500 persons had been completely obliterated and the inhabitants rendered hopeless. Most of these are living as internally displaced persons in the safe havens of major towns. A substantial proportion live in refugee situations in Guinea and Liberia. This physical situation notwithstanding, INEC claimed that voter registration had been completed in 30 out of 44 chiefdoms in the Eastern District. Moreover, on polling day, voter turnout was recorded as 138.7% for Kailahun and 116% for Kenema, whilst for Kono District, the most populous of the three, it was only 48.1%. This is disgusting, man. Hey, salud. Quite apart from this, when the voting figures for the southern and eastern districts were compared with those of other districts, which were less than severely affected by the rebel war, and therefore better able to record higher voter turnout, the result is extraordinary. For example, in the whole of the western area, including Freetown, which by then had only experienced marginal rebel incursion, voter turnout was only 55.7% of registered voters for western urban Freetown and 43.9% for western rural. In the north, Bombali district recorded 67.31%, while Cambia had only 47.3%. Guys, are you listening? Are you paying attention? The southeast in 1996, they were getting 132% or 47% voter turnout. That's how ridiculous and shameful it is. And all of this is coming to light now. I mean, that's why we are reading this. Because for some of you guys, you have to stop with too much entertainment, the short videos, that's all you do. And it's everything is about chasing clout. That's all. Everybody is not. Nope. We are going to pay attention, guys. We're going to pay attention. All right. Let me see how much. 56 minutes. So I have 4 more minutes, guys, because I want to keep these lives at an hour every day, okay? But let me finish this part. So, let's see. For example, in the whole of the western area, including Freetown, which by then had only experienced marginal rebel incursion, voter turnout was only 55.7% of registered voters for western urban Freetown and 43.9% for western rural. In the north, Bombali district recorded 67.31%, while Cambia had only 47.3%. Potloko 39.95%, and Tonkolili 79.8%. The UNPP candidate won all those northern districts by very wide margins. Can this depressed turnout in the western, northern, and Kono districts be attributable to voter apathy? If so, why was it peculiar to districts that had not been comparatively less affected by the war? The war situation could hardly be blamed for the low voter turnout in those areas, since most of the population had, by the time of the poll, migrated to the urban centers, where they were able to vote without fear of intimidation. Some other explanation must therefore be found. On top of all of this, very close to the poll, a statement attributed to the RAF had appeared in the pro-SLPP press, threatening in no uncertain terms that unless the SLPP presidential candidate was returned winner, the country should not expect that the RAF would lay down its arms. It was even widely suspected to have helped in rigging the vote for the SLPP in the southern and eastern districts. This immediately raised speculation about the relationship between the RAF and the SLPP, and they lingered until Fode Sanko himself publicly confirmed that he had been a member of the SLPP. Finally, reference may be made to statements contained in a position paper submitted by the AFRC delegation to the Abidjan meeting of the ECOWAS Committee of Four on July 17, 1997. In that statement, the AFRC said that the 1996 elections had been massively rigged and shamelessly manipulated prior to that on July 1st. In another statement, the AFRC junta had actually confessed to some of its own members rigging the voting. The AFRC junta had actually confessed to some of its own members rigging the vote for the SLPP candidate. It declared as follows: a lot has been said and written about the democratic nature of the Kaba government. It is true that elections were held, But the time has come for the truth about those sham elections to be laid bare. It should be known, as we do trust that it will never recur, that elements of Sierra Leone Army, on the instructions of the National Provisional Ruling Council, NPI, should lead. Oh man, I want you to listen to this. I'm going to take it from the top. All right, I'm going to take it from the top. All right. So this was the AFRC statement, about what actually happened in the 1996 elections. Let's take it from the top. A lot has been said and written about the democratic nature of the Kaba government. It is true that elections were held, but the time has come for the truth about those sham elections to be laid bare. It should be known, as we do trust that it will never recur, that elements of the Sierra Leone Army, on the instructions of the National Provisional Ruling Council, NPRC leadership, who was the leader at the time, Marabio, and with the tacit connivance of INEC, were instrumental in causing the elections to be won by the SLPP candidate. Guys, let me do this for you guys. Let me do this for you all. I am going to do this for you all. I'm going to do this for you all. Hold on for a second. I'm going to do this. Let me play this. I want to play this video. I want to play this video for you all. I want you guys to see what I'm talking about with the Marabio, the video where Marabio said, "I wore a kind of green." I'm going to play that video. Let me play that video for you all. I wish I queued up that video earlier. I'm going to play that video and end this live with that video. I want you guys to see this. All right. This is the video. I'm going to play this video for you guys. I want you all to see this.
Feel it in this party.
Yes. Yes.
When it was all dark and doom, I know where I stood until this party came back to power in 1996. I have never explained how they came to power, and we not do so tonight.
That's true.
But I know that they didn't just win. We didn't just win. I wasn't a part at the time of the party. I wore green, but a different green. When it was all dark and doom.
So guys, I want you to see that. I wanted you to see that. I wanted you to understand that everything that I'm reading for you, written by Abass Bundu, is the fact. This was Marabio talking about in 1996, the kind of green that he wore. This is a crime in itself. This man confessed to a crime. If the APC and opposition people were serious, this is a crime in itself. But this is not going to go unpunished. Marabio will be prosecuted for all of these. Electoral laws should not be violated. When you rig elections like this, it is a crime. That is why Donald Trump and all these other people are paying the price in the United States. Ambassador Brian Hunt, you guys should pay attention to this stuff. This was the 1996 elections. There's no statute of limitations to these kinds of crimes when somebody commits these kinds of crimes. He has confessed to it. Right in front of us, he confessed to it. All right? So, I'm going to leave this live here, guys. I think this is a good way to end this live. I'm going to start again tomorrow. But before I close it, let me read it one more time. What the AFRC made it very clear. That Sierra Leone Army, on the instructions of the National Provisional Ruling Council, NPRC leadership, and with the tacit connivance of INEC, were instrumental in causing the elections to be won by the SLPP candidates, Alhaji Ahmed Tijan Kaba, in parts of the southern and eastern provinces. The collaborators in this anti-democratic conspiracy were so overzealous that their operation resulted in a totality of votes cast in those areas, being far in excess of the total number of registered voters. When this was brought to the attention of the chairman of INEC, Dr. James Jonah, his disingenuous response was unilaterally to penalize Tijan Kaba by reducing the votes cast in the relevant areas to equal 100% of the registered electors. Thus has Sierra Leone been saddled with the undemocratic Kaba government. It is in the same light that the appointment of James Jonah as Sierra Leone's ambassador and permanent representative to the United Nations is to be seen as his reward for a fixing job well done. James Jonah's hysterical ravings and ranting following an intervention must be seen as a similar light, in a similar light. Whatever view one takes of this confession, its evidential value is undeniable. It lies in the fact that it is a voluntary confession by the military itself that some of its own members had been guilty of vote rigging in favor of President Kaba. And with that, I'll take you again to the video of Marabio telling us that
clearly in this party.
Yes. Yes.
When it was all dark and doom, I know where I stood until this party came back to power in 1996. I have never explained how they came to power, and we not do so tonight.
That's true.
But I know that they didn't just win.
I want to show you guys something. I want to show you how, if you look at this guy, I want you to look at when Marabio was saying this. I want you guys to look at this guy right here. You see this guy? This is Napoleon Kuruma. He's a lawyer. If you look at him, when Marabio was saying what he was saying, you can actually tell that as a lawyer, he's saying, oh my God, this guy is actually confessing to a crime. As a lawyer, look at his face. So when Marabio was saying what he was saying, I want you guys to see this.
Not do so tonight.
That's true.
Pay attention, guys. See, look at his eye.
But I know that they didn't just win. We didn't just win.
See,
I wasn't a part.
Everybody in the table.
The party.
You see, even this guy, you could tell they knew something wasn't right. Watch them. Look at their faces. Look at this guy right here. It is a confession. Anyways, guys, I'm going to leave it here. I'll do it again tomorrow. We're going to read this book. Sierra Leoneans deserve to know these things that have happened, the younger ones in the population. But before I close, let me just say thanks to everybody that made comments. Lamin, thank you. IIB, hello. Hello, Lamin. How are you, my brother? Victor Gassaini, I'm following from Liberia, Buchanan City. Thank you, my brother. Thank you. Rita Tomlinson, good evening. Thank you, Rita. Thank you. What's the topic? Rita, you're asking what's the topic. It's you have to follow me back. I know it's been a while, but I've been reading the book of Abass Bundu for the past 3 days, as you can see. So go back and watch those other lives, catch up, so you can see where I'm at and follow. So you can be abreast with what is going on. Okay. Patrick Dust, right on, big brother. What's up, superstar? Thank you, Patrick. You're the superstar as well, my brother. Thank you. And then Lamin, IB, this book entails all the evils done by SLPP, by BO and SLPP, past and present happenings. Thank you, my brother. You got it right there. So, yeah, guys, I'm going to leave this right here. You guys enjoy your evening. Let me go and join my family, see if I can watch a movie before it gets dark and eat something. I'm kind of hungry right now, but I wanted to come and talk to you guys and do all of this. Like I said, I don't want to analyze because I have all the videos to show you guys and everything, but I'm putting everything together for all of us as Sierra Leoneans so we can make a decision together. Read, learn about your history. Stop chasing these short videos for entertainment purposes. Just all this. I'm not against all those programs, but they're not helping us. Sierra Leoneans should not be engaged in any kinds of fashion shows and all that nonsense right now. Believe me, the amount of people that are suffering, and for the amount of people that are actually destroying our country, we should be paying attention to our politics and holding these people accountable. That is what we should be doing. But anyways, bye-bye, everybody. All right. Good night.